Dragon Quest. Easily one of the most important and influential video game franchises of all time. In 1986, it kicked off what we think of as the modern turn-based RPG with that first entry, and in its 10 subsequent mainline entries has continued to not only stay true to its roots, but reinvent itself in slight ways which have gone on to inspire tons and tons of other video games. For example, we might not even have Pokemon if not for the ability to catch and collect monsters in Dragon Quest V. I am a latecomer to the franchise, and it's possible that you are too, dear viewer, or you're now a sicko like me who has played a large chunk of most of the Dragon Quest games. Outside of Pokemon, I hadn't really played or gotten into any turn-based RPGs in my entire life. I just didn't have a lot of friends who were into them. I was more of the Xbox 360, stay up all night and play Grand Theft Auto 4 online with my friends kind of crowd. No one I was surrounded with was playing like Final Fantasy in the 90s and early 2000s. But as I've gotten older, I've kind of wanted to get into one. There are years of my life where I just like tried out a bunch of them. I tried playing the hits, I tried playing the classics, I tried the Final Fantasy games that everyone told me to play, and none of them really clicked for me until Dragon Quest XI S, Echoes of Elusive Age, Definitive Edition, launched on the Nintendo Switch. And that thing just consumed my whole life. Mind, body, soul. I was Dragon Quest XI. S's, Echoes of Elusive Age, Definitive Edition for the Nintendo Switch. I think as a fan of Akira Toriyama's Dragon Ball, I was kind of an easy mark in a lot of ways for Dragon Quest to eventually be the one that got me. But on top of that, it was the music, and it was the world building, and it was the characters, and it was the story, and it was honestly, I think, the chapterized nature of the way the story unfolded that really lulled me into I can play a little bit of this every day until it's done. But that, you know, sure did take like 100-something hours to be done with that game. But it was one of the best video game experiences I've had in my whole life. And it has gone from not only the first non-Pokemon turn-based RPG that I eventually finished to being, I think, probably my favorite game of all time. It's tied for first place. But that was my gateway into the franchise, and ever since then, I have bounced between a bunch of other ones. I have finished a couple here and there. A couple years ago for our podcast, Into the Aether, we did a retrospective episode on the Nintendo DS where we played through every great Nintendo DS game. We just like polled a bunch of people, looked at all the lists that existed online, played through like 150 or so Nintendo DS games, and for that episode, I played through the entirety of and then finished Dragon Quest V. That was the second one that I ever finished, and it was an unbelievable experience. That is maybe one of the best games ever made. I think everyone should play it. It might be a tough one to just jump right into if you've never played Dragon Quest before, but I mean, it is one hell of a cherry on top if you are a fan of the franchise already and you haven't played it. And spoiler alert, that ended up being our favorite game for the Nintendo DS. For the show, but also individually, we both walked away saying that is the best Nintendo DS game, hands down. Honestly, you need to be a fan of turn-based RPGs to get into that. You need to be also okay with playing something a little more retro like that. But if you're a person who kind of either works your way up to it or is already okay with that, you should give yourself the gift of having played Dragon Quest V. Amazing video game. And the other one I played all the way through on this guy, the Miu Mini Plus, while I was stuck in an airport in San Francisco, and then the whole flight home, and then also when I got home. In the course of like 2 or 3 days, I played through all of Dragon Quest 1. And that was a interesting experience from like a historical context. It was like just kind of fun, I think, to jump in and see where it all started. There are some rough edges, honestly. You need to consult a guide more than I think I'd like, but I mean, it was pretty good. It holds up, is what I'll say. That said, there's a remake coming soon, so maybe hold off on playing the original until that comes out. And ever since then, I've dipped into and out of pretty much every other Dragon Quest game. I don't know which one will be the next one I play all the way through to completion, but I would like to, over the course of my life, God willing, I have enough years left in me, play all the mainline Dragon Quest games. There is one huge outlying problem with that wish, with that desire, and that is Dragon Quest X. Dragon Quest X was launched in 2012 on the Nintendo Wii, if you can believe it, and after the success of Dragon Quest VIII, like globally on the PS2, and then Dragon Quest IX, which had a kind of more multiplayer first focus for the Nintendo DS, Dragon Quest X kind of flipped the script a little bit and launched as an MMO, a massively multiplayer online video game. It was then ported to Wii U and PC and Android and iOS and Switch and PS4, and there was even a browser-based version of Dragon Quest X at one point, which is pretty wild. And the hitch with all of these versions is that they were all only released in Japan. The game had never left Japan, which made a lot of people very sad. So yeah, fans have wanted to play Dragon Quest X for a long time, some going as far as learning Japanese and figuring out just how to read and write Japanese so they could play it for themselves. But I think a lot of people, like myself, were holding out hope that eventually Square Enix would decide to localize that game. I think especially with the rise of Final Fantasy XIV as a huge staple of probably Square Enix's income as people pay them monthly for that thing. Why not do the same with Dragon Quest? Why not also just have this constant stream of income coming from Dragon Quest X? It seemed kind of like a no-brainer. And that leads up to, weirdly enough, my birthday in 2021, when Yuji Horii, the creator of Dragon Quest, showed up on a stream for Dragon Quest Day and announced a couple of things. The first thing he announced was the Dragon Quest III remake, which, thank you, Yuji Horii. Great birthday present. Really looking forward to playing it. I know for sure that he did that for me. Thank you. But the other thing he announced, which, set the internet alight, or at least that specific pocket of the internet alight, was Dragon Quest X Offline, which is a ground-up remake of the story of Dragon Quest X, but positioned as a single-player turn-based RPG. And this is brilliant. This is a brilliant idea, because to port and localize an MMO creates a bunch of issues. It's not just as easy. Not that localizing games is easy in the first place, but it's not as easy as just, here's the script, localize it, because you need to spin up servers in other parts of the world. You need to account for moderation in other parts of the world as well, with a whole bunch of different languages. There are a lot of other factors that come part and parcel with trying to localize an MMO for another region. And I understand why that upfront cost, I don't know, in some boardroom somewhere, a bunch of weird executives wearing suits would say no thank you. On the flip side, if you take that whole game and turn it into a single-player RPG, then you can just, again, localize the script and release it wherever you want. It seemed like a slam dunk idea, because not only are you introducing a whole other portion of the world, honestly the rest of the world, to a game that they're longing for, but you're also introducing it in the style that they're used to. They've played through Dragon Quest 1 through 9 and also played Dragon Quest 11 as these single-player RPGs. It's kind of cool to take that story of Dragon Quest X and say, we feel so confident in this story that we're going to release this as its own thing, and you can go play that. So I think a lot of people walked away from that stream, myself included, being pretty optimistic. We're going to finally be able to play Dragon Quest X, and it might not be the MMO version that we've all wanted to play, but hey, at least we're going to be able to play a version of Dragon Quest X. Isn't that exciting? Here's the hitch. That stream was in 2021. It is now 2024, and Dragon Quest X Offline has been localized, but only in Korea and in China. So China, Korea, Japan. Those are the three places you can play Dragon Quest X offline. Here's the second hitch about Dragon Quest X offline. The game was only created in the first place as a way for people to onboard themselves into the MMO. So instead of being this standalone experience with a beginning, middle, and end, and you walk away feeling happy and satisfied, the whole conceit of Dragon Quest X offline, I can't believe this is real, is that you're supposed to play through the whole thing and you experience the story in an offline context, but when you're done, you can upload all of your characters and all of your items and equipment and experience, and all that stuff carries over to the MMO, and then you can jump into the online portion of the game and just pick up where you left off in the offline version. So because of that, there is still an intrinsic need for it to be Japan only, which is wild. And that also means likely they just won't localize it here. Every once in a while, somebody at Square Enix will give some kind of quote that gives a bunch of people on the internet hope, myself included, and say something to the effect of, we have a lot of big plans for Dragon Quest X. Oh, Dragon Quest X, we're going to do so much with that thing soon. Just you wait until you see what we're going to announce there. And then inevitably it's like, we added pumpkins to one of the town's Halloween event. Isn't that exciting? Oh yeah, still Japan only. You don't get to see the pumpkins. Sorry. So I've given up hope. on Dragon Quest X. I mean, most other stuff, but Dragon Quest X specific, I've given up hope. It's kind of like the Switch 2 situation where, like, you know, every single day on Twitter, on X, the everything app, TMTM, the Switch 2 is trending. Every single day, somebody concocts some reason that today is going to be the day that the Switch 2 is announced. And it never is. That thing's not going to get announced until next year. But while I can't force Nintendo to announce new information about the Nintendo Switch 2, I can take matters into my own hands and play Dragon Quest X. There are ways. There are ways to do it. And I don't know if you can tell from my voice. Maybe you've listened to other episodes of this show. Maybe you've watched other episodes of this show, and you can tell that I'm not 100%. I currently have the novel coronavirus. And as a person incapable of resting like a normal person and also not working on tiny little projects whenever I'm given any semblance of free time, I decided to spend all my free time figuring out how to play Dragon Quest X. So come along with me on this journey while we play Dragon Quest X in English, and I'll talk you through how to do that, why you should, and how you should. Okay, so before you start, you need to ask yourself one big question, which is, do you want to play Dragon Quest X, the MMO, or do you want to play Dragon Quest X offline? Both of them require jumping through a bunch of hoops. They're not big, scary hoops. It's not the Westminster Dog Show. You know, they're small hoops. You can jump through them. You're just following instructions. But it's worth mentioning that it's like pretty annoying to get both of them up and running. So it's not like there's one that's easier than the other. It's really just a question of preference. The other thing that's worth mentioning at the top is that both of them are available to play for free for a certain amount of time. Dragon Quest X, the online edition, has a free trial in the same vein as a lot of other MMOs. There is a monthly subscription, but that doesn't kick in until I think you hit level 50, if I'm not mistaken. Dragon Quest X offline has a demo in the same vein as a lot of other Square Enix RPGs, which is that you can play for like 10 hours, and then after that, you got to buy the full thing. In both cases, you will probably need some kind of credit card. You will be signing up for accounts in other countries. You will probably need a VPN of some sort. It's messy. It's messy and it's a little annoying, but also if you really want to play these games, or if you, like me, are just bouncing back and forth between taking Dayquil and NyQuil and losing your mind slowly and drinking so much water, you could do it. If I could do it in that state, then you can do it in any state. Let's start with Dragon Quest X, the MMO, because that one I think is the more interesting one to me in a lot of ways. Because how do you do that? How do you get that game running in English? The answer, as with so many things on the internet, is an extremely dedicated and incredible community of people on the internet who have decided to just do it because they wanted to do it and they wanted to allow other people to do it. No gatekeeping here. The gate is wide open, baby. You're using two great community resources to get Dragon Quest X running. The first is a thing called Adventurers Abbey, which is a website which will just walk you through the entire process of signing up for a Japanese Square Enix account, signing up for the free trial of Dragon Quest X, the surprisingly convoluted process of actually installing the game, because it's all in Japanese, and it's a little bit tough to make your way through all the boxes, and sometimes if you click the wrong one, it will just like break the whole process. It's weird. It's a weird process. But after the game is installed, you will then install Dragon Quest X Clarity, which is the other great, incredible community resource, which is the program that will just run in the background of a computer and live translate the video game while you're playing it. This is where there's a little bit of a hitch, because you're going to need to either sign up for DeepL or Google Translate through like Google Cloud, both of which will require a credit card to sign up for. The thing is, it's not really actually going to charge you probably ever. The amount of actual translation that is happening live and on the spot is like character names and a couple things here and there. Dragon Quest Clarity, believe it or not, is mostly hand translated. This translation layer running through either DeepL or Google Translate is just kind of like a last-ditch effort for a couple of the things that just like can't be translated by the community. For example, the name that you decide to name your character, they can't translate that, obviously, so that just happens live. So once you have Dragon Quest X Clarity installed, and then you have the game itself installed, and you start Clarity and then start the game is in English. And it works with a controller, which is really nice. I was surprised to find that. And it also runs pretty well. I mean, you know, it's a 2012 game released for the Wii, but they've updated it since then. And it runs pretty well on my not-so-beefy computer. I have a little mini PC called the B-Link SER8, which, you know, it can run some stuff. It's not a good computer, but it's definitely not like a thing with a big graphics card plugged into it. It's not like a full tower PC for the people who go out and build PCs. I needed something, or wanted something, I guess, that would get me access to a lot of like smaller indie games on Steam. I'm not out here trying to play Cyberpunk or push it to max settings or whatever. The thing can run Cyberpunk at kind of low settings, but it can run it, so that's kind of cool. That said, Dragon Quest X Clarity and the game itself running simultaneously is not taxing the system so much that it is even remotely noticeable. The only times that it's noticeable are every once in a while when I'm talking to somebody who it's clear the team hasn't translated their text box. The game will freeze for like a fraction of a second, and then the translation will show up. But outside of that, it's running like butter. The thing about Dragon Quest X as an MMO is that I am not historically a huge MMO fan. In the same way I have always wanted to get into a turn-based RPG, I had also always wanted to get into an MMO, and I've tried a bunch of them over the years. I got WoW and a like 3-month free trial for WoW at one point. Did not get into it. I tried Guild Wars 2 for a while and played that for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, and like kind of enjoyed it, but didn't really love it. I played WildStar. I think it's called WildStar. WildStar was a game that came out, I want to say, around 2013, 2014, somewhere in that vicinity. I was working for a video game website, and the conceit of my covering that game was literally, let's see if we can get Brendan into an MMO. The answer, no. No. That's dumb. That's really dumb. I think the closest I've ever gotten, really, is Final Fantasy XIV. That's a good video game that you could play mostly solo, has an incredible story. You can play with other people, obviously, but I sure didn't, really. That said, I still haven't even finished A Realm Reborn, which is that, like, first piece of that game. So what are the odds that I'll ever go back and see the rest? I don't know. I love what I have heard. I love the enthusiasm I've heard from people about Final Fantasy XIV, but there's a lot of other games to play, man. That said, I think if there was ever an MMO that would really hook me, it would be a Dragon Quest 1. First of all, it's got turn-based combat in it, and it's like slightly different than the mainline entries. It's got an ATB system, which is very similar to like the old Final Fantasy games, or like a Chrono Trigger or something like that, where time is moving even while you're selecting your option. And I'm not a huge fan of the ATB system, but I also understand why you would need to include it in this. When you have thousands of people playing a game simultaneously, I understand why it can't be turn-based. Like, actually, truly, like, time freezes turn-based. But that said, it still feels really nice. I'm loving the story. I think the characters are great. I love the intro to the video game. Like, the opening prologue of it is exhilarating. The cutscenes are hilarious and kind of frightening and just, like, really well-directed and well-acted. It's cool. It's a good video game. I'm excited to play a lot more of it. Or at least I would be if I wasn't so caught up in playing Dragon Quest X offline as well. So let's talk about that real quick. Dragon Quest X offline is interesting because you're using the same exact English translation as the online edition. The games are so similar that they're using the same script from Dragon Quest X Clarity in Dragon Quest X offline. Pretty wild. All you have to do is go to Nexus Mods. I'll put all the links to all the stuff I'm talking about, by the way, in the description. You just have to go to Nexus Mods, and you have to download the version of the English translation that coincides with the version of the game that you're playing. They have an English translation for the Switch version and the PS4 version. I chose to go the most legal route possible in this case, and pay for the Steam version of the video game. This did require going and signing up for a Japanese Steam account. This also required using a VPN, which, as I learned after the fact, is actually against Steam's terms of service. I guess the idea is that they don't want you using a VPN to access other versions of Steam where like a game might be cheaper in Germany on some day, so you just, are always hopping on a VPN and buying the cheapest version of a game. I'll talk about the weird hitch that creates in a minute. But all told, if you follow all those steps and just download the mod from Nexus Mods and put all the files that they give you in the correct spot in your hard drive, it just works. It just works pretty easily. And I really like Dragon Quest X offline. It is honestly really great. It feels to me, and I don't mean this to be too disparaging, but it feels to me a little bit like Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl from like an art style perspective, just like done with a little more care is how I'd put it. I think those are fine games, but there's something about Dragon Quest X offline that feels like a modernized version of those top-down RPGs like Dragon Quests 1 through, 7-ish. It's reminiscent of those styles, but still feels modern. It feels like another avenue that these kinds of games could have taken instead of the 2D, 3D-ification of like every single game that's happening right now, which, to be clear, I enjoy. Octopath Traveler, great. Live Alive, great. Star Ocean, great. And Dragon Quest 3, probably going to be great. But Dragon Quest X offline feels weirdly like an alternate path for those kinds of games. If you want to harken back to the roots of the genre while still pushing it forward, this is not a bad direction to take, I think. But alongside that, and as I mentioned at the beginning of this, like, there's something to be said for the fact that this is just like an offline game that you can play by yourself and just kind of make your way through at your own accord, not need to worry about other people or like chat or whatever. You're just ingesting the story. There's something, I think, just very nice and very comfortable about that. Playing on your own time, not needing to be connected to the internet is another big one. Well, therein lies the problem, actually. So here's the thing. You need to be connected to a VPN to play that game, or at least to activate that game. I don't know if you need to be connected after you've activated it for the first time. So my thing specifically was like, I just really wanted to play this game on my Steam Deck. It just felt like such a good Steam Deck game. It is verified on the Steam Deck, so if you can get it running, it does run. But I was just like worried based on the stuff I'd seen online about using a VPN to activate it. So I just I couldn't get it activated. I got it downloaded by transferring the files from my computer to the Steam Deck, but I couldn't get the game activated. What I learned in a lot of Googling is that if you download a game that is region locked on Steam, you have 90 days until it unlocks that region. What this means is I now have a calendar event that I set up for myself sometime in January that says, hey, you can play Dragon Quest X offline now. But now I have two versions of this game on my computer and I don't know which one to play, which is such a classic, stupid gamer problem. You know, that is a Dragon Quest VIII thing as well. There's a great PS2 version and a great 3DS version. I have both of them. I've played probably 15 hours of both of them, and I still can't decide which one I'm going to actually go through. By the end of that experience, it's possible I will play through all of both of them, which is like sickening to think about, but I just can't decide. They both have pros and cons. It's also like Persona 3, which now has, I don't know, 3 different versions that people will recommend to you. There's Persona 3 Fez for the PS2, which is great. There's Persona 3 Portable, which is now ported to a bunch of other platforms, which is great. And there's Persona 3 Reload, which is great. But all of them have different little things that would make you want to play that version over the other versions. Well, maybe it's just between Persona 3 Portable and Reload at this point, but I'm sure there's some people who are Fez diehards. I think what it comes down to, for me, when it comes to Dragon Quest X, is do I think the MMO, being a thing that will be constantly updated, is enticing enough to get me to play and stick with an MMO, especially knowing that I would need to, at a certain point, start paying for it monthly. There's definitely something to be said for the fact that when Dragon Quest X offline is done, it's done, and I could just put it down and say, I've played Dragon Quest X, but I don't know. I could see myself getting invested in the very lively Discord community that is playing Dragon Quest X online. I could see myself getting into all of the different expansions that have released and the events that happen all the time. There's a world where I get into an MMO, and it is this one. That's possible. Maybe I'll come back one day with a review of Dragon Quest X or something, and you'll know at that point which one I actually finished. But for now, I just wanted to leave it at that. Dragon Quest X, it's this missing game in the Dragon Quest mainline franchise, and thanks to the efforts of a bunch of people on the internet who are just doing the Lord's work, you can play it too. It's amazing. Thank you so much for watching. That's going to be it for now. Subscribe if you haven't, and I'll catch you in the next one, baby. Bye-bye.